Hello and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Louise P. Sloane. Hey, Louise, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Craig?
Very good. So I'm excited for today because um, I went online and found a bunch of your works, and boy, do I have a lot of questions.
Oh,
So I'm hoping that you can
this
answer as many of
has
these as possible.
this has a great story if you wanted to stop right here.
Sure, let's hear me.
So
Let's hear the story.
this painting, CBRRO,
Hmm.
was acquired by the Nassau County Museum of Art in 2023
Okay.
and was just very featured in an
Mm,
exhibition called Seeing Red,
mm.
Renoir to Warhol that
Nice.
was up for 6 months. It just closed on January 5th.
Is
And
this a part of a larger series?
Well, it follows the I don't paint in a series. It's
Okay.
part of my current, I would say it's become my signature style.
Okay. All right.
Painting is individual, but this painting, the museum used it for the billboard out on the street,
Okay.
and they used it for their poster.
I,
And
my first question for this is I want to confirm the size for this. So
this is,
it's
let me
roughly
look it up. Let me look it up.
that's okay. No, no. I'm just asking roughly. Is it like the pieces that are behind you?
Those are smaller. Those are
Okay.
smaller.
So this
Um,
is
this
big.
this piece was 60 by 48 inches.
Okay, great. So
And
I'm kind
yep,
of curious, when you're dealing with size, is that like a comfortable size for you, or do you ever wish to work like way bigger?
my dream size is 50 by 46 inches. I
Okay.
like to work in a 10:9 ratio. I did paint like squares within squares for a while, but I found that just that little bit of a vertical pull gave
Uh,
it a lift. Now, a 48 by 60 is an easy size to obtain materials in.
mm-hmm.
And I did make several paintings this size, but they're more difficult to handle. And
Mm.
quite frankly, they didn't fit in my van before I and I would have to
Necessity.
and I would have to drive them around somewhere.
Well,
But
the
48,
reason
yeah,
go ahead.
you go.
The reason I chose this particular picture, so this is featured obviously on your webpage, but it's very prominent. But I really enjoyed the movement of the piece. So you
Mhm,
have, the horizontal and the vertical sort of clashing, but it's also the shift in the dark reds and the lighter reds where you show a
mhm,
little bit more blue coming through
yep,
on the
mhm,
other sides.
yep.
So my question to you is when you're making something like this, do you pre-plan the
No,
colors that or you shift while you're working?
yeah, I shift while I'm working, and really the undercoat because they start, obviously blank, and then I have what some people would think of as like a second or third gesso coat. I map out the quadrants in the square, and I kind of randomly use whatever I have a lot of paint of for that the underlayer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the writing is not colored.
Mm-hmm.
It's a molding paste, and with these I used pumice gel with it because
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't able to buy a lot of these pigments in a flat paint. So
Mm.
that flattened it out. And then I worked from there. Now, this, I can't tell you exactly what it started out as. It didn't start out with those blues because after I get finished doing the center square,
Mm-hmm.
that's when
Right.
I start working on the rest of it. And if I put it up on the wall and it doesn't slam me, I go back in with a number one or number two brush and
Huh?
I paint all the negative space
Yeah.
and I repaint all the surface. They're very three-dimensional. It's
Yeah.
not flat, it's very dimensional. So I never know how it's going to end up.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of the fun of it, I've found.
It's
Uh,
exciting.
yeah.
So
So this.
this piece is a little piece, and
Mm-hmm.
this was while I was gathering. Everything that I do has something to do with language and controlling language, lexicon, writing. I think it would be obvious to anybody that saw the time frame of this. I was going through menopause. So
Hmm. Hmm.
there's markings, there's like fertility symbols,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
there's markings. Most of them are in 28 to 31 days
Hmm.
cycles. And
Okay.
then other symbols that I just kind of pull from everywhere. And I was really into doing this bilateral split and then making it look like it was kind of stitched together.
Yeah.
And it's open for interpretation. To me, I never meant it to have anything to do with the female anatomy, although I've been interviewed by feminist organizations that like, ooh, and I'm like, okay,
Right.
that's what it says to you.
Well, now to me, the reason I chose this particular picture, I would really want to see this in person because I can imagine
Come on
the
over.
richness of the pigments, the thickness of it. It almost looks like it was found, not made to me,
Mm-hmm.
or even like it was a carved rather than layered upon layer.
Well,
Uh,
it is layered and it
mhm,
is carved in.
mhm.
And
But the whole thing looks carved, like it almost looks like it's a piece of stone that you found or
well,
something.
that was the point. They were
Hmm.
making these things that almost look like runes, like bits
Hmm.
and pieces of history. And I'll see what else you brought up. But this was another phase. And then after I moved out of that, I became much more regulated. I started
Hmm.
adding on putting a real distinct grid back into my work to
Hmm.
organize it. Oh, and an interesting piece that you chose.
So I love this painting. I think this one is really it's great. It
This
really just kind of works
painting,
for me.
which
Uh
is so out of the norm for me,
huh.
was created for a fundraiser
Okay.
was in London for Ukraine. And it
Okay.
had to be about this circle. And I'm part of an international coterie of non-objective artists.
Hmm.
So this is unlike pretty much anything that I would do.
Hmm.
It had to be white. It was
Hmm.
called White Circle.
Hmm.
And they, I guess they auctioned off not the real piece, but photographs of prints of the pieces. So I have
Hmm.
prints of my friends' pieces. I still have the piece. And I thought, well, I'm going to, playing around, I'll do something different, but also that feels a little bit like, work that I've done before.
To
So,
me, it's what really makes this work is the fact that outside the circle is like an off white, right? There's like
mhm.
a little bit of gray, but so little. I think some people don't even notice that when they first see it.
It's also because it's layered. So
Yeah.
that is layered on top of other colors, like that blue and that blue black, that's underneath.
Right. And it
So
still works its way through. And that's what I
yes.
really kind of enjoy. It's a painterly painting to me.
Well, that's a lot of people always say I'm a painter. Oh,
I
all right.
so I am curious, and I don't know if it's this one or the next one, the materials that you use. When I was looking at your work, and maybe I'm wrong about this, it appeared that some older work was being used with encaustics and oils. And have you made a switch to acrylics now? Is
Yes.
that's correct? Why did
Yes.
you do that?
Well, first of all, as a young artist, coming, in New York in the 70s, I was, one of my painting instructors was Bryce Martin.
Nice.
Um, I love Jasper Johns's work, and I kept reading about encaustic work.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, living in Lower Manhattan, you could go down on Canal Street and you could pretty much find anything you wanted. And I started screwing around with bags of pure pigment powder that you could buy,
Mm-hmm.
not like today. It cost nothing.
Right. Uh-huh.
And I even tried doing some with like paraffin and raw oil. And then I found a guy who was selling beeswax in 10-pound blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew that these were going to like last? This one wasn't in my retrospective, but
Okay.
there aren't many of these left. And
Is this encaustic? Did I?
this is all beeswax.
Okay, this one's beeswax. Okay.
Well, beeswax. So encaustic is really
Right.
means that you're
Oil with
fusing.
wax. Mm-hmm.
Well, no, it just means you're fusing the layers together. I found out about encaustic by reading something used to be called the Artist Handbook.
Mm-hmm.
And I mixed Damar resin crystals. I would have to pound them down into a
Mm-hmm.
powder and
Wow.
a
Okay.
hot plate with
Uh-huh. Old
old
school. Uh-huh.
coffee cans, with water until it got like this thick amber.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would throw in beeswax, and I had
Mm-hmm.
uncured beeswax, which had pieces of straw and stuff in it. Then I had
Hmm.
amber beeswax and I had bleached beeswax. And then I would dump in pigment and just like kind of stir it.
Hmm.
So this obviously had red underneath it,
Right.
cardinal red actually. And then I put that on with a cheap brush because once you use the brush in there, it's
Yeah,
not
it's
worth
gone.
anything. And then I mixed up different black. This was I can't I still have some of the bags left.
What's the size of this one? Is it
48 inches square.
okay? I would
And
love to see this one too.
they're, I mean, I shouldn't say it. They're gorgeous. I hadn't seen some of these for 40 years. And then,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
this is a stunner. This one is really great. And
thank you.
I've got one more.
Okay. Oh, so this is from 1976. This was in my retrospective. And this is paraffin,
Hmm.
which you're not supposed to use, and oil paint on raw canvas, just
Hmm.
bleeding through. It's like, and this was, I was very young in 1976. It's like
Hmm.
finding myself. This was very influenced by, Morris Louis and Helen
Hmm.
Frankenthaler.
Hmm.
The outer edge has, it was white, but it has just like this paraffin kind of melted onto it and smushed through. There's maybe three of these left, and they
The
are,
reason,
yes.
God,
No, they blew my mind when I took them out. I was like, wow.
the reason I chose this one, not only because of the distance and time that it was made, but I still see remnants of this work in your current. And I thought, ooh, that
Me
was
too.
really kind of quite fascinating to see.
Well, me too. Well, that's why I had a retrospective.
Yeah,
So
right.
I
So,
I had these works. I was very successful with this work. I must have worked in this beeswax for a little bit more than a decade.
mhm.
And this is terrible, but I'll put it out there. All of a sudden, working with encaustic paint became a thing, and I'm a loner. I don't belong to
Right,
groups. I don't,
right.
and I work like old school with this. I remember R&F and Caustics had sent me samples to try. I didn't like it. To me, that was like the difference between a cake mix, which is very tasty,
Hmm.
or a master baker
Hmm.
who's putting something together and it's
Hmm.
very unique. And it seemed that everywhere that I went, and I would meet other artists, and you always say, "Oh, great, you're an artist. What do you do?"
Hmm.
Well, people usually say, "Well, I'm a painter, I'm a sculptor,
Hmm.
musician, I'm a dancer." They don't go, "I'm an oil painter. Oh, I'm a watercolor painter." But
Uh-huh.
everybody's going, "I'm an encaustic painter." And I thought it reminded me of that little fish in Finding Nemo, where it
Uh-huh.
looks up
Uh-huh.
to the other fish and goes, I see now this would be a terrible interview. And then it goes, I'm obnoxious. And it rubbed me the wrong way. And I
Uh-huh.
also found that people were using this medium
Yeah.
and it didn't make sense. It was like they weren't doing anything with this medium that they couldn't do with paint.
They weren't taking advantage of it.
I
Hmm.
don't even know if they weren't taking advantage of it. It was like I would think, well, what was the point?
Right.
Why why did you even bother doing that? Plus, it's very fragile and it's a permanent situation. Like, when you make a mark, it's not changing.
Hmm.
That's
It's
how
there.
these layers
Hmm.
are fused together. And I abandoned it. And I thought, let me see if I can achieve this like nice texture and
Hmm.
luminosity with something else. And that was when I started working with acrylics and acrylic pastes. And there was a period of work there where I had great success. The work sold like crazy, but it wasn't moving me personally. And then I moved into these things, making like these runes,
Uh-huh.
and that developed into taking. First, I started doing some tendus, and then I started making actual text,
Hmm.
transcribing actual text. So everything ties back to something moving from left to right. I'm dyslexic,
Thing.
get mixed up. I mix up metaphors. This was my way of controlling language.
Well, speaking of your start, I want to go
Yeah.
way back.
Okay.
And I want to know a question I love to ask artists is, do you have a a first memory of being exposed to art?
Winky Dink. It was a TV show that was on like when TV was kind of new on, I guess, 1955 or something.
Okay.
And it was like they came on and you were supposed to have a magic screen, which
Oh, right, right. I
and you're
remember.
supposed to, tell you what you're supposed to make, and you
Right.
write it, with your crayons on the magic screen.
Uh-huh.
And I could never follow their directions. I'm dyslexic, they well, over here we're gonna. So I would just, do my thing.
Right. But it
And
stuck with you, like enough that you just fired that answer off right away.
yes, well, no, it did because I've been asked that before. And
Okay.
then I've also explained to people, and also when I talk to like young kids or something, that I was the nerd,
Uh-huh.
that nerd who couldn't wait for Crayola to come out with a new color. It was like, oh my. So I was always making art from the time I was a small child.
So if you made art, at what point did you decide officially I'm going to be an artist for?
I guess when I was leaving high school, I mean, my
Okay.
whole last year of high school, I remember I made a hand drawn, and of course, I don't have it anymore, 16 millimeter film.
Okay.
It was like dots,
Uh-huh.
different dots, and the dots were like, they were, bouncing, and then they would bounce together. And I used Joe Murillo's solo Far More Drums as a soundtrack.
Okay.
I managed to hand that in to every class. I was in a suburban high school. And then, I went to go to art school. The art teachers
Mhm.
nurtured me. And, I was happy to go to art school. I thought, my parents are going to pay for art supplies. I worked in
Uh-huh.
a supply store in the hometown, so I got like free supplies and brushes. I think I probably still have some of that stuff.
And then it was it an easy glide, or did you
It,
have to do a day job as well?
when I was in college, I
Yeah.
had to do a job during the breaks and
Okay.
during summertime. I
All right.
had jobs, but I was always an artist. There was like no question about that's what I was going to do.
So I want to dive back into the art in particular. I've got a couple questions. I want to know, you're in your studio, you're going to make something new. Do you have any go-tos that inspire you to create?
Um, because I'm into doing this transcription from my texture,
Hmm.
sometimes a song will stick in my head.
Okay. All right.
And then I'll start getting lyrics for the songs. I spent 7 years transcribing Allen Ginsberg's collected poetry from 1940. I have the book somewhere, and I've been asked this so many times, but I think it's 1947 to 1980. And
Uh-huh.
I transcribed it in its entirety. I
Okay.
started transcribing Howl, and
Uh-huh.
then I did a couple of Howl paintings that's in the title. And then I was thinking, why am I just doing Howl? Maybe I should just do all of it.
When you're in your studio and you're doing something like that, do you need silence, or do
No,
you need?
I usually have music on.
Okay, so you can still be working on a piece that's about music or words and have another conversation going on.
Yes.
Oh,
The only part that I have to really concentrate on the writing is when I'm doing the actual transcription. And I
okay.
get lost, which is
Yeah.
good because then I have to have copyright issues.
Okay.
So it's okay. It's not exactly not exactly perfect.
You had mentioned in the first piece that we showed about reworking the piece.
Uh-huh.
So I'm kind of curious, is that a methodology that you've always had, or is that
Yes.
something newer? So you've
Yes,
always
and
done that.
actually that whole development of that rubbed surface,
Uh-huh.
rubbing the surface and pulling paint off, and then rubbing it on and pulling it off. That's that was it. And I was also trying to get that kind of waxy feeling to it. So I would
Okay.
put paint on and rub it off and just worked with different things mixed into the molding paste to give it like a great texture. Like somebody mentioned to me, ooh, if you have any old cereal, try that because it gets encapsulated, it won't rot. And I was like, oh, that really works.
That's
So I
great.
was always looking to make some great texture to go on. And then I kind of morphed into this kind of regulated kind of uniform texture,
Uh-huh.
even though it's not uniform.
Right.
And that's become kind of a signature style. Now, I'm not stuck in it because
Right.
I refuse, I will do something. I'm struggling with the painting now. It's really
Uh-huh.
busting my chops. Um, and I'll think, well, should I do that? And I go, well, there aren't any rules.
Right.
There are
Right.
no rules,
Right. I
you know.
like the struggle. I want
Well,
it
the
to be a
challenge,
problem.
well, that's the
Right.
challenge. It's like
Yeah.
I can't make a maquette.
Yeah.
I'm not making a sketch of what I'm going to do because then I
Right.
already did it and
Right.
it's boring. And if
Hmm.
somebody wants to commission me, the best that I can do is say, tell me what colors you would want to see in it. Like that
Hmm.
guy that raps from people,
Hmm. Hmm.
and he
Yes.
gets the words from them and he works their words into the rap. Well, I'll work what you're saying to me in there somewhere, but I can't tell you where.
So you do rework pieces as you're working. Have you ever reworked old pieces or really old pieces? Or
Yes.
once they're made, they're done? No, you
Well,
so you're
I
open.
have.
Okay.
Because sometimes, not every painting is a great painting.
Yeah. Really?
And and they're very process oriented. I can only really make around 10 paintings a year. They're
Okay.
very, very labor intensive. And I will go back in sometimes and I'll think that really that's not
Right.
that's not
Right.
doing it for me.
Sometimes time can be your friend. Um, when you're making your work, does your audience ever come into your mind while you're working?
No,
Okay. So
I
they're
don't give
just,
a shit. I mean, afterwards, I care. I want to hear
hmm
what people have to say about it.
right.
My husband is a musician and an architect, and he's a great but he loves everything.
Hmm.
Okay, come in here, walk to the back and turn around and just tell me when he goes, oh, I like that. And I'm like, thank you. All right,
Right. I'm not fishing for compliments.
that's a, he did say the piece I was working on now, he did say it's very dark. I said, well, I wanted it to be a little bit dark. So that means I accomplished what I was
Yeah.
aiming for. But to me, it was like dead. He wasn't catching it. And I'm struggling with the colors. I've been back and forth with golden. It's like, okay, mix me this, make this for me. How come you discontinued this color? These colors suck.
Well,
Um,
speaking of color, the one
yeah.
question I was eager to ask you, and this is kind of open ended, so I'm not sure how you can answer this. Um, what does color mean to you? Like when you
Color
think
is
about color.
everything. Color
Okay.
is everything. Everything that you see, everything you experience has color. It's the
Right.
it's the flavor. It's
Right.
what gives life flavor. We don't walk around in a black and white movie, even
So
if there are different shades of black and gray.
so would you say then that color gives your paintings flavor?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Because even the black paintings have glimmers of like the one that you really like. It's got that cardinal red peeking
Uh-huh.
through. And
Yeah.
I worked for a whole year. I did nothing but black paintings, superficial. The superficial surface was black. There'd be little bits of green coming through, and that's what ignited the texture. It ignited
Hmm.
the whole painting. Was that
Yeah.
that little flash of color?
You're preaching to the choir with there. Uh, I do want to know. So I see a lot of your paintings and drawings, I would say. Do you ever experiment with other mediums as well? Photography, sculpture, dance, poetry,
No,
you
no.
mentioned film early. So
Yeah,
you're solely focused on,
I'm painting.
yeah. I mean,
I'm
I get it. It's limitless in how much you need to do. How often are you
some
in your,
people some people I know can do everything, but I don't have that. I know what my comfort zone is. I know it gives
yeah,
me pleasure, and if it's
yeah.
not fun, it's not worth doing.
I mean, I asked the question, but I kind of knew the answer because I can tell your pictures are so focused that that's the way they're going. So it's
Uh-huh.
just asking. Uh, you're in your studio. This is your studio
Yep.
currently.
Yes,
How often are you in your studio?
every day.
Every day for like just 5 minutes every day, or
No, all
like all
day.
day? Okay.
All
Um,
day, sometimes into the night, sometimes in the middle of the night. It's attached to my house. All I have to do is walk through a door off the kitchen and I'm in here.
boom.
I'm like
Do-
that gangster, that gigante, in his bathrobe walking around Greenwich Village. I'm usually in a bathrobe with and my apron on. I got
uh-huh.
dressed for you.
It's a studio robe. I like that. Do you need to be alone in your studio, or
Yes.
yeah, you can't handle distractions?
And I can't handle people being near me.
Okay.
The
Do
dog
you
knows he'll go to sleep, but if I'm talking to someone, then he starts giving me a hard time.
do you have any studio rituals?
No,
No, no. So
no.
here's what I mean by that. I have an artist that I talked to the other day, and she says, "Well, every day I go into my studio, I have these certain things that I have to do. I have to turn on NPR, I have to make myself a cup of tea, and I have a tuna fish sandwich, and then she can
No,
work."
no. And
So for
actually,
you,
no food in my studio at all, ever.
no food. Okay.
No food in my studio. No, there's no, I mean, what's the ritual? I get up in the morning and I walk in here to see how what I did the day and night before looks in the natural light.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll take a picture,
Uh-huh.
and then we'll walk out and
Okay.
then I'm back in here.
Well, I would say that looking at what you did last night is a ritual.
All right. Well, but I don't always have to do that, and
No.
sometimes I'm so consumed with it that I I have to get back, I will climb out of bed and I'll just come down. I have an annoying dog now that
Me
will
too.
start barking and yipping if I
Hmm.
leave the
If
bedroom.
you're not there.
And my husband has different hours than I have, so it's a problem.
Uh-huh.
But
So
yeah,
I got two more questions for you. The first one is so there's a multitude of work that you've got, and you said you make per year only about 10 paintings per year or thereabouts.
yeah,
So is it one at a time or
yes,
are you working out? No, so it has to be one at a time.
one at a time. And so what I have on my table behind me is a couple pieces you're asking about reworking, like some scrap pieces of metal, a piece of
Okay.
metal that for the project I had a show in 2015, and I had my fabricator make all this particular size for me. And at that time it was, the square had to be dead center, so the dimensions had to be perfect. And the fabricator cut a few of them and they were off kilter, and I was like, well, that doesn't work. So I had those and I used them for years, almost like little work tables when I was
Uh-huh.
working on paper.
Uh,
And then I thought, let me slap some stuff on there and see what happens. So I did prime some of those up, but
Okay.
I've got these little things waiting to
Uh-huh.
be worked on. I started working and then I went back to the pieces I thought were finished and I was like, they're not done. And I'm
Let
going to
me
finish those first.
let me sneak in one more question in
Mhm.
between, which is when your works are finished, do you do anything to seal them?
No, I
No,
can't.
just
My colors will get wrecked.
yeah.
And I think there's enough coats of paint on there. It hasn't been a problem yet.
Hmm.
I also don't mix my own colors ever.
Hmm.
If I have a color that I want, I have Golden makes it for me, custom made, because if something should get scratched,
Hmm.
I need to be able to fix it without having to repaint the whole thing. So I either use the
That
color
makes sense.
straight out of a tube or straight out
Right.
of a container, or they've got that mixture on file and they can mix it up for me.
It's very pragmatic. I like that. Final question. Question I ask all artists. What does making art do for you?
What does it do for me? It makes me be alive. That's the whole purpose. I mean, I'm one of those people where my mind never stops, it never shuts off. I don't want to travel. I'm sorry, I don't want to go anywhere because that takes me away from my work. I don't want to go in a residency and bring a bunch of little things to make little quick things because that's not the way I work. I don't really want to socialize with a bunch of artists while I'm working. It's too distracting. I love to talk to people. I love to go out to dinner. I love to cook for people, but that's at 7 o'clock at night.
Mhm.
During the daytime, people who know me, they're like, don't ask me to go out to lunch. I don't do lunch. I'm working. I'm
It's like you're
working.
reading my mind.
I'm working, 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 working. So it's my life. It really is and has been always. It's always been the priority, making
Well,
art. It's a
well,
craziness.
it is a sickness. I'm with you. Well, Louise, I can't thank you enough for coming by to talk with me today. I'm really jazzed we had this conversation. I can't wait to actually see your next exhibit in person. tired of online stuff. So I want to thank you again for just taking the time to talk to me. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in to Art Show today. We really appreciate your support, especially if you like and subscribe. That helps push all these videos out to new people. So please do so. So again, Louise, thank you. It was a
Well,
pleasure
thank you.
speaking with you.
Thank you for talking to me. It was a lot of fun.
It was great.
Good
Take
time.
care, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.